Memories of war. I sit on a wooden bench in the park every morning. The air is fresh and the wind is gentle. Birds sing in the trees and children play nearby. My old friend George joins me every day. We are both old, with white hair and tired legs. Today, George smiles as he sits down. "Do you remember the war?" he asks. I nod slowly. "Yes, I remember it well," I say. "We were young soldiers back then, full of energy but also full of fear. The days were long," I say, "and the nights were cold." George agrees. "But we stayed strong because we had each other." We talk about marching through forests and hiding in trenches. "Do you remember how heavy the bags were?" I ask. George nods. "Very heavy," he says, "but we carried them anyway." The sun shines through the trees as we share more memories. "Do you remember the bread they gave us?" George asks with a smile. I laugh. "Hard as a rock." George chuckles. "We used to dip it in water just to eat it," he says. I smile and shake my head. Those were difficult days, but we survived together. We sit quietly for a moment, remembering the past. The park is peaceful, but our minds are full of old stories. I look at George and say, "Do you remember the big battle?" George's face becomes serious. "Yes, I remember. It was scary. I think back to the sounds of the guns and the shouting of soldiers. We were all scared," I say. "But we had to keep going." George nods. "It was the only choice we had." We remember the day we got lost in the forest. "I thought we would never find our way back," I say. George smiles softly. "But we did. We always found our way back." "Do you remember the camp we stayed in?" I ask. George laughs. "Of course. The tents were small and the food was bad, but we were happy just to be alive." The wind picks up and the trees sway. George and I sit in silence, each lost in our thoughts. I feel grateful for these memories, even the hard ones. "We were strong," I say quietly. George looks at me and smiles. "Yes, we were." The sun begins to set and the park starts to feel cooler. George and I sit on the bench, talking about the old days. "We were young then," I say. "We didn't know how hard it would be." George nods. "But we made it through. We were brave." I smile and remember the courage we had. "Yes, we were brave, but we were also lucky," I say. I think about the soldiers we met during the war. Some of them were kind, some were not. "Do you remember Sergeant Williams?" I ask. George laughs. "How could I forget? He always yelled at us, but he was a good man." "We learned a lot from him," I say. "He taught us how to be strong in tough times." George looks down at his hands. "I still think about those days sometimes. It feels like it was yesterday." "Me too," I reply. "But we survived and we are here now." We both smile, proud of what we went through. As the sun sets, I feel thankful for the memories and the lessons we learned. The park is quiet now. There are fewer people walking by, and the birds are singing in the trees. George and I continue talking, sharing stories of our time as soldiers. "I remember the first time we went into battle," I say. "It was scary, but we didn't show it." George nods slowly. "I remember. I was so nervous, but I didn't want anyone to see. We had to be strong for each other. I smile, thinking about those days. We were strong, George. We had no choice. George takes a deep breath. But it wasn't easy. I lost friends. I still think about them. I can see the sadness in his eyes. I know, I say softly. We all lost something during the war, but we didn't lose each other. We made it through together. George looks at me and smiles. You're right. We were a team. I smile back, feeling proud. We were, and that's why we're here today. As the evening comes, we sit quietly, enjoying the peaceful moment. We don't need to say anything more. The memories we share are enough. The sun begins to set, and the park looks even more beautiful in the warm light. George and I are still sitting on the bench, talking about the old days. You know, I say, sometimes I think about what life would have been like if we never went to war. George thinks for a moment. I wonder too. Maybe things would have been different. Maybe we would have had more time for other things. He pauses and then adds, but I don't regret it. We learned a lot and we met good people. I nod. Yes, we did. The war changed us, but it also brought us closer. We became stronger, not just as soldiers, but as friends. We both sit quietly for a while, letting the calmness of the park fill the space between us. Do you ever miss it? George asks suddenly. Do you miss being a soldier? I think carefully before I answer. Sometimes. The feeling of working together, the purpose we had. But I don't miss the fighting, the fear, the danger. I don't miss that part. George smiles. I feel the same way. We both laugh a little, remembering the old days, but also knowing that those times are behind us now. The park is quiet again. The only sound is the soft rustling of leaves in the trees. We don't need to say anything more. The memories we share are enough for now. As the evening sky turns darker, I look at George and smile. I'm glad we are here talking about the past, I say. It's nice to remember the good times. George looks at me with a soft expression. Yes, it is. We don't talk about these things much, do we? Life gets busy and we forget. I think about that. You're right, we get caught up in everyday life. But it's important to stop and remember, to honour the past. George nods. It helps us understand who we are today. The war made us who we are. Even though it was hard, we became better people because of it. I take a deep breath and look around the park. I think I'll always remember those days, but I'm also happy with my life now. I have peace. I have time to enjoy the little things. George smiles. Me too. And I have you, my friend, to share the memories with. We sit in silence for a while, enjoying the peace around us. The sun has set and the park is quiet, but we are not alone. We have each other, and that is enough. We know that we will always be able to talk, to share, and to remember the past together. Eventually, we stand up and start to walk slowly down the path. Good night, George, I say as we reach the gate. Good night, my friend, he replies, and with that we go our separate ways, carrying the memories with us in our hearts.